Welcome to the Spark to Bonfire Inspiring Insight, the 4 treasures. I'm ready. You ready? Let's do this thing. The 4 treasures are very valuable and you can obtain them. The purpose of Insight is to tell you a little bit about them and hopefully inspire you to go get them for yourself. I'm telling you, life is too short and too precious to live a life without the 4 treasures in it. And sadly, I see many people that live lives that do not have these treasures as part of their journey. So what exactly are the 4 treasures? They are joy, adventure, serenity, and fulfillment. I'm going to unpack each one of those 4 for you. Let's start with joy. And I tell you, joy is so important. It breaks my heart when I encounter people who are living a life absent joy. You do not want to do that. So what exactly is joy? I like the dictionary.com definition of joy. It is the emotion of great delight or happiness caused by something that is exceptionally good or exceptionally satisfying. Exceptionally good or exceptionally satisfying. What is it that delights you? What is it that brings you joy? So here's some of the things that bring me joy. I love getting on a plane. That brings me a tremendous amount of joy. Just traveling in general, whether it's by plane or train or road trip, that brings me joy. Flying first class, man, that is right up there. Flying first class, if you've not done it, it's absolutely phenomenal. Sitting on a beach in the Caribbean with a great cocktail, that brings me a lot of joy. Having a magnificent meal, that brings me joy. By the way, if you know how I define a magnificent meal, I've got some Culinary Treasure Network content that defines that very thing. You can go to gohaveamagnificentmeal.com to check out that content. Link to that is down below. Now check this out. Those things that I mentioned that bring me joy, that delight me, they're not necessarily readily accessible and they're not something I can necessarily experience on a regular basis. For example, if I wanted to sit on a beach in the Caribbean with a really good cocktail and do so on a weekly basis, I'd have to move to the Caribbean. But there are those things that delight you, that bring you joy, that you can experience on a regular basis. They're easily accessible. I call those simple joys. I've got a whole teaching that I've done. It's a Spark to Bonfire equipping insight called Your Simple Joys. A link to that is down below, or you can go to yoursimplejoys.com for more information about that. But it's really important that you have some simple joys in your life. They do some amazing things. That content will cover that, but you don't want to miss those. So what are some of my simple joys? I like reading what I call enthralling books. They are books that are captivating to me. They're either mystery novels or they're thrillers. I have a whole list of them that I like to read, different series and authors that I talk about. I cover that in depth on the Your Simple Joys content. But I also love going to movies. That's something that's a simple joy for me that I can access on a regular basis. And it's not just the movies for me. It has to be the right movie. I like a movie where the good guys win and good things happen. There's a victory at the end. And then it's the whole experience. I love it when I have the popcorn and some M&Ms with peanuts and I have a Coke and the lights come down and then the previews start and then the movie starts. I love that whole experience. For me, that's just a very much delightful, simple joy. I mentioned simple joys because some people, they have some things that bring them joy, but they're just not readily accessible. And then they end up living a life absent joy when it's just not necessary. And I'm telling you, you do not want to live a life absent joy. Adventure, that's the next treasure that we're going to tackle. Dictionary.com defines adventure as participation in an exciting undertaking or enterprise. For me, man, I love traveling. For me, travel is a wonderful adventure. Now remember, adventures are exciting. And yes, I mentioned that travel brings me joy, but travel is also very exciting to me. Don't miss this. Adventures are exciting. I tell you, there's nothing quite like the feeling that you're heading out on an adventure. And sadly, some of you have gone way too long without having that wonderful sensation. I tell you, there's nothing quite like the feeling that you're heading out on an adventure. And sadly, some of you have gone way too long without having that wonderful sensation. So don't be a stick in the mud. Don't be a curmudgeon. Go on adventures. So here's a question for you. What kind of adventures excite you? And here's an even bigger question. If you have a significant other, do they know what kind of adventures excite you? And if you're dating, I think that fit matters so much. And if you're dating someone, I encourage you early on in the process, start talking to them about what adventures excite you and find out what adventures excite them, because fit matters. And if you both like very different kinds of adventures, you're probably gonna have a lot of challenges. It's just a really tough thing to go through. I've seen it in my work with couples where this person likes this kind of adventure and this person likes this kind of adventure, and there's not much overlap. And I'll tell you, that can create a tremendous amount of heartache in a relationship. Serenity, that is treasure number 3. Serenity is the state or quality of being calm, serene, or tranquil. And I so hope there are times in your week on a regular basis where you experience calmness or when you experience tranquility. People go long periods of time not having in their life, and I'm telling you, if you're a human being, you will not be able to live your best life without the ability to regularly experience serenity. Now, when it comes to serenity, some people have what I call a defective story, an unhelpful story. It's a story that's kind of running in the background that they're maybe not even aware of. And the story is that they have to be busy. And so whenever they find themselves not being busy, they wrap things back up and make themselves busy. Do they like it? No, not necessarily. But because their story, their defective story that they may not know about says they have to be busy, when things start to get calm and tranquil and easygoing, they actually start to feel uncomfortable. So man, they ratchet things back up and they get back to being busy. I know you've had friends like that, you've run into people like that, and they can actually wear you out. And what's sad is they don't really like the life that they're living. They don't like being so busy, but they keep doing it over and over again because that's their defective story, and serenity actually feels uncomfortable to them. And I got to talk about boring. When I work with clients and I'm teaching them, my Bonfire Insight clients, we're talking about serenity and introducing into their life. Sometimes they say, well, that sounds boring, and they can't imagine peace and calm in their life. It just sounds boring to them. And it's not boring at all. In fact, serenity, when you experience it the way it's intended, it leaves you feeling recharged, restored, and rejuvenated. It's a wonderful experience. It is anything but boring. Now, I mentioned serenity. I mentioned busy, and the flip side to me of serenity is agitation. And there are those people that you've run into your life where for them, the issue is not that they like things to be busy, but they are so uncomfortable with serenity. They want things to be agitated. And they're always stirring the pot and bringing trouble and bringing agony and misery. And these kind of people just wear you out. I don't know if you've ever been in a corporate situation where there's someone always seeming to bring agitation. And when things seem to be going well, they bring agitation. Really, you have to watch out for those people and distance yourself from them. They'll cause trouble at work. They'll cause lots of trouble in small churches, and they're not necessarily bad people. They just have a story that leads them to be, that's just the way things should be. Things should be agitated. It's a defective story. It's not a helpful story, but that's one they have. And a lot of those people, if they really dig into it, they'll discover, oh, it's okay to live a life where there's tranquility and there's serenity, and it's a whole different experience for them. And I want to talk to you a little bit about my journey related to serenity. Because it's very, very important. I still remember the moment that I realized I had finally obtained this treasure. Now, I've been battled back from 3 great disasters, and one of those great disasters was a very, very dark childhood. If you want to know more about my great disasters, I've got content. I tell that story over there on the Stephen Shomler website, or you can go to 3greatdisasters.com to watch that and find out about my 3 disasters. But the one I'm mentioning right now, my dark childhood, I spent a lot of time with an incredible counselor in my 20s, a number of years in counseling on a weekly basis, a lot of journaling, a lot of writing. Now, the particular paradigm that my psychologist had was pretty amazing. You saw him on a weekly basis, did lots and lots of journaling, and then you got to the point where you'd kind of loosen stuff up enough inside and you were ready. It took me about 3 years of regular work and lots and lots of journaling, where you then could go on what he called an intensive, and that's 3 weeks where all you're doing is dealing with your stuff. And some of you are like, 3 weeks? Well, yeah, I had a very dark childhood, and I had a lot to deal with and a lot of trauma that I needed to heal from. And so I ended up staying in a nice home on Fox Island, it's in the Tacoma area. You go across the Narrows Bridge and you're into Gig Harbor, and you come back around and here's Fox Island. And I looked back, if I sat on my deck of where I stayed for those 3 weeks, I looked back toward Tacoma, looked at the Tacoma Narrow Bridge, beautiful view. And then Monday through Friday, I'd see my counselor for a couple hours early in the morning and spend all days just journaling. And there's no lock or key, nobody's keeping an eye on you. But if you follow the protocol, there's no books, there's no reading, there's no TV, there's no exciting food. They encourage you to take boring food. You're just there to write and journal and grow. And I grew a tremendous amount during that time. Now, my childhood left me with the inability to sit still. I had a hard time relaxing. I had a hard time enjoying things. I had anxiety. I had some anxiousness. And just sitting down and being calm was just not possible for me. And I healed enough from that trauma, from the trauma of childhood during those 3 weeks that I remember sitting there one evening and I had a cup of tea and some simple cookies, and the moon came up. And I sat there for about 5 hours in the evening watching the moon go across the sky. And I have to tell you, that was a life-changing experience for me because I'd never been able to just enjoy that kind of experience. Now, I don't know if I'm going to sit and watch the moon come up for 5 hours now at this point in my life, but I can if I want to. I can really lean into that peaceful, serene experience, and having the ability to do that is phenomenal. And now I do enjoy sitting and watching the moon. If I'm out, I see the moon, and I can take the time to actually enjoy it. And I'm telling you, not being able to do that, not having that treasure in your life, it is absolutely tragic. Now, I mentioned trauma. If serenity is something that you have a hard time implementing into your life, it could be that you have some unaddressed trauma in your life. And if that's the case, I would encourage you to go see a good counselor. 2 books you can check out. One book is The Body Keeps Score. The other is What Happened to You? And I have to say that very carefully because when I was growing up, questions were weaponized. And so even though the book title is supposed to be a nice, encouraging question, we invite you to tell us, what happened to you? The way I hear it is, what happened to you? I hear it, on this heavy thing. Because even to this day, I still have sometimes with questions, direct questions posed to me, I internally flinch, because questions were not good in my childhood. Yeah, questions like, why did you do that? And there was no good answer. Because I'm stupid. Well, that wasn't okay. And it was just a mess, questions were. But I hope you heard that. If you struggle with serenity in your life, it could be some unaddressed trauma that's actually impacting that. But regardless, whether you've had trauma or not, you want to make sure that you have serenity in your life. It is a powerful, wonderful, incredibly valuable treasure. Now we get to fulfillment. I absolutely love fulfillment. People who experience fulfillment are deeply satisfied. Fulfilled people are deeply satisfied. Fulfilling personal relationships are deeply satisfying. I have to tell you, I'm so blessed in my life. I have personal relationships that are deeply satisfying. Same thing with work goes. People that are fulfilled professionally find the work they do to be very satisfying. And I am so blessed. The work that I do now, we'll talk about the work that I used to do related to fulfillment, but the work that I do now is so incredibly satisfying to me. Now, I've said the word satisfied a lot in this definition, trying to define and help you understand what fulfillment is. And satisfying means that, I looked it up. I've got a definition for you. It satisfies the wants or the needs of a person. And people that are fulfilled, they're satisfied, they have their needs and their wants met. Now, I mentioned relationships, personal relationships, and I mentioned work. And professional fulfillment and fulfillment in your personal relationships. I did that because not having fulfillment in those 2 areas of life can be really difficult. If you don't have relationships that are fulfilling to you, personal relationships, I know people that their most intimate, closest relationships not personally fulfilling, and I have to tell you, that is very tough sledding. You have got to have relationships in your life that are personally fulfilling. It's the only way that you can live your best life. And work, so many people I encounter are not satisfied professionally. The work they do does not satisfy them, and I tell you, that is just an awful way to live. Some of you know my story. Summer of 2011, I stood in a dirt driveway in southeast Portland and decided to change my life and create myself a whole new career out of thin air. And one of the big motivations for that is I was just not fulfilled professionally, and I could not go on living a life where I was not fulfilled professionally. As some of you know, I spent 10 plus years in the banking world and 10 plus years in the nonprofit world. My time in the banking world, I had a lot of success. There was one point in my journey, where it is pretty cool to have, where your gross paycheck every month is $25,000 a month or $30,000 a month. That is a pretty awesome thing. But even with the wonderful money, I got to a place where that work was just not satisfying to me anymore. I know for some of you that sounds crazy, but I just wasn't satisfied in that work. And in the nonprofit world, I loved caring for the people that I cared for, and I loved helping people with life change. But for me, it got to a place where the other bullshit that I had to deal with, the unnecessary hindrances that were holding people back, and some destructive hindrances that I encountered, I just couldn't live with it anymore. And so both in banking and in the nonprofit world, I got to a point in my life where I just couldn't do them anymore. And I really, really wanted to have a life where I was fulfilled professionally. And man, I set out after it. And as I mentioned, I am fulfilled professionally with what I do today. And I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful. I don't take it for granted. Some of you wonder, well, what does he do? Well, over on the Stephen Shomler website, stephenshomler.com, I've got some content. What do I do? You can watch it and check that out, where I kind of unpack the things I do and the things that I love to do professionally. So a big question, maybe too big a question, is, are you fulfilled? And maybe you have an answer for that, maybe you don't. But I found it's helpful for people to break that down into more bite-sized questions. Do you have relationships in your life that are personal relationships that are deeply fulfilling, deeply satisfying? Do you have close relationships that aren't satisfying, that aren't fulfilling? Are you satisfied in your work? Are you fulfilled professionally? Or maybe another way to put it, are there areas in your life where, as soon as I talked about fulfillment and I defined fulfillment as being deeply satisfied, you thought of those areas in your life, you're like, ugh, those parts of my life are a mess right now. I would encourage you to pursue the treasure of fulfillment, because I'm telling you, life is too short and too precious to live a life where you don't have fulfillment. So those are the 4 treasures. They're incredibly valuable: joy, adventure, serenity, and fulfillment. I encourage you to go get them in your life, to add them as part of your journey. If you're having trouble with that and you'd love to work with me, man, I've helped lots of Bonfire Insight clients tackle the things in their life holding them back from having those 4 treasures. But like I said, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Life is too short and too precious to live a life where you don't have joy, adventure, serenity, and fulfillment. You gotta have them. They're absolutely wonderful. I'm Stephen Shomler. I am on an epic journey, and I wish the same for you. Go live the life you imagine.